Coming up, Debbie and I are here for the Friday Roundup. Lots to talk about. Trump's 100% record in getting his cabinet picks through, the roundup of criminal illegals at Colony Ridge in Texas, Jeff Bezos' surprising new turn at the Washington Post, and the distinguishing characteristics of generations X, Y, and Z. Hey, if you're watching on Rumble or YouTube or X, or listening on Apple, Google, or Spotify, please subscribe to my channel. Hit the subscribe or the follow button. I'd really appreciate it. This is the Dinesh D'Souza podcast.
America needs this voice. The times are crazy. In a time of confusion, division, and lies, we need a brave voice of reason, understanding, and truth. This is the Dinesh D'Souza podcast.
Debbie and I are excited for our Friday Roundup. And honey, I'm about to start with something. I don't think you actually know about this. Trump just put this out. We are hereby reversing the concessions that crooked Joe Biden gave to Nicolas Maduro of Venezuela on the oil transaction agreement. Apparently, this was dated November 2022. And basically, Trump says that after the electoral conditions he's seen in Venezuela, which have not been met, the fact that they're still not taking back all their violent criminals, I am therefore ordering that the ineffective and unmet, quote, Biden concession agreement be terminated as of March 1. And then he goes, thank you for your attention to this matter. So Trump is becoming, I think, aware of this disgrace in Venezuela and at least taking the first steps.
Yeah. I mean, I wish he would have taken more steps in his first term, because there were many things he could have done to prevent that Maduro, like holdout.
Yeah.
In fact, I even wrote about this back then I was writing for El American. I wrote about the fact that a Biden regime would mean a just, unfiltered and just carefree Maduro, because as you know, yes, I said, if you want Venezuela to become free, a free country, the free country that it was before, a Biden regime or any other Democrat regime would just not work. It would send it over to a status quo of what it's been for the last 20 years.
Well, there's an interesting implication here, which is that, Maduro rigged the Venezuelan election.
Many times over.
Yeah. And Biden was probably well aware, foggy though he might be in many respects, that they rigged the 2020 election. And so in some ways,
wink,
Biden
wink.
and Maduro, right, are in the same zone.
Yep.
And so Biden was like, this guy is like a comrade.
That's right.
And we should make life easy on him. And he did.
Yeah. Except in this case, the international community did not come to the aid of Trump. Whereas they are definitely saying that the Venezuelan election was stolen. I pretty much think all of them, except for your typical socialists down there that are not. But everyone else definitely is.
I mean, this is a significant change because, as you know, going back to earlier years, Jimmy Carter went down to Venezuela. He attested to the absolute purity and no problems here with election fraud, and certainly not in the ultimate outcome. But I think as the years have gone on, even the Democrats and the left, they've had to admit that this is now a tyranny.
They have to. I mean, really, Venezuela really stands no chance if this man is allowed, and by allowed I mean by just leaving him there.
If he's not ejected.
If he's not ejected from the scene, Venezuela is going to go down a very, very deep hole. It already is in a deep hole, but it's going to get even worse for the people. And I want, I always tell my cousin, I know he wants to live in America and everything, but I'm like, what if we could fix Venezuela?
You could live in your own country.
You could live in your own country. And I am willing to bet a lot of the Venezuelans that live in America now, not me, I don't count, but a lot that came after Hugo Chavez and after Maduro, I bet they would want to go back and invest in their country and make it great again.
Well, we've noticed that. Two things. I mean, one is that a lot of the Venezuelans who are here are still emotionally, intellectually. I mean, they live in Venezuela, so to
They
speak.
are still Venezuelan.
They're displaced.
Yes.
The second thing I had noticed, very striking, and this is, by the way, not true of all countries, they're highly patriotic.
Very.
Their attachment to Venezuela is very strong. They would go back if given a chance.
In fact, that's the first thing most people mention about themselves is, I'm from Venezuela.
Absolutely,
and
the first
happened to
thing.
me too.
Well, you did
Yeah,
too.
I always did, even as a kid. That was, I got teased a lot in elementary school, I have to confess. Every once in a while I would get the, you're a wetback, and La Migra's coming for you. I was like, guys, first of all, I'm legal. Second of all, I didn't swim. I actually flew. Okay.
So you emphasized that you were
absolutely.
You hadn't crawled over the
That's
Rio
right.
Grande. You had flown in from Venezuela.
That's
and not to
right.
mention the fact that your mom is an American and
Yes,
has
of
been for
course.
generations.
Yeah. But I wanted to make that very clear that I was born in Venezuela, raised there as a kid, and that I flew to Texas, not swam.
Interesting.
Okay,
All
just
right. Let's
had
talk
to put
about
that in.
Trump. Here's an article from the New York Times. They are quite unnerved at what's going on in Washington. I want to read you the headline. In President Trump's Washington, a Moscow-like chill takes hold. And here's the first line. A new administration's efforts to pressure the news media, punish political opponents,
Oh, no.
and tame tycoons evoke the early days of President Vladimir Putin's reign in Russia.
No way.
This is I don't know if you know this guy, Peter Baker of the New York Times. He's a beta male.
Is Bezos getting rid of him?
No. This is the New York Times.
This is the New York Times,
Yeah.
not the Washington
You're talking about
Post.
the Washington Post. And
Yeah.
we might talk about that.
Yeah.
But Baker is this patsy. He's this kind of pasty-faced Pillsbury Doughboy type of guy, bespectacled, and very weak. But he fancies himself the kind of leader of the anti-Trump forces in the New York Times, so to speak. So anyway, but I think it's quite amusing that they feel like they're living in Putin's Russia.
Did Vladimir Putin did he go after corruption in the government? Just asking for a friend.
Not as I recall.
Did he get beat out by his opponent in a clear case of fraud?
No.
Did he almost get put in prison by his opponent?
Well, interestingly, no. And of course,
Okay.
now Putin did arrest one of the billionaires in Russia who was a critic of his. But what's interesting is Trump hasn't done anything like that.
No, exactly. It was done to Trump.
It was done to Trump,
That's why
not
I'm
by him.
asking. That's why I'm asking. He has zero similarity to Putin. I mean,
Yeah.
zero.
Well, I think it's an indication of the intellectual poverty of the left right now. They, you can always tell when they're grabbing at straws or they're trying to find something, and this is sort of the best they can do. The New York Times is kind of I would call it not just the thought leader, but it is the sort of media coordinator of the left. They decide what the narrative is going to be. They're not really a newspaper. It's almost as if they are a Goebbels-type propaganda operation outside the government, but working hand in hand with the Democrats.
Yeah. The interesting thing about all this is that it's really interesting to see the media go crazy, because in communist countries, the media drives the narrative, but it's never revoked. It would be like the media in Venezuela or the media in communist China or whatever being revoked. In other words, seeing freedom for the first time and acting on behalf of the tyrannical government and going, oh no, now we're under tyranny, when in fact they're now under freedom. But because of the rhetoric and because of the propaganda, they work against freedom.
That's a good point. It's almost, you're talking about a kind of inversion.
Mm-hmm.
Normally, you think of the media as being people talk about the adversary press. The media fighting for the citizens, fighting for the people, fighting for freedom against a tyrannical regime. You're saying no. The media, for the past 4 years, has been very content to be the spokesman the voice, the defender,
the voice of the regime.
the voice of the regime. And so the media was content to inhabit a country driven by tyrannical, censor these people, block those people, lock these people up, arrest the leader of the opposition party. The media was good with all that.
I mean, think about what you said yesterday when you were talking about the NSA. Why wasn't the media all over that?
Right.
Why did they hide it or not even report it? Why didn't anyone go in there to look at corruption? Because why? Because they're all in the same incestuous pool of corruption. That's why.
Right, right. I mean, in fact, as I mentioned when I described the New York Times article about it, they deliberately use euphemisms, Baudelarization. What they basically act is like, no, there were some NSA people discussing some sexual themes, and everybody's in an uproar about that, not giving you any idea of what was really going on in these chat rooms.
I mean, just the fact that even 10 employees of the NSA.
Oh, we're talking about hundreds of people.
Well, okay, but I'm just saying that even if it was a small fraction, that's still a lot of people, taxpayer dollar.
And people have a right to know what these government people who are, by the way, these aren't people at, it's one thing if it was, these are people at the post office, they've got nothing to do. No, these are people at the NSA.
Oh, yeah.
It's a highly secretive and supposedly
spy network.
Trustworthy spy network. And they should be trusted by us, the citizens.
Yeah. And these are the same people that are in an uproar because Elon Musk might discover some like social security numbers, which is not even the case. But I'm just saying they're like, oh my gosh, all of this privacy is in the hands of these people. Well, my gosh, I would rather my privacy be in the hands of those people than those NSA people.
Or the people who had it before. They give you the idea. When you hear someone say something like, I can't believe that the unelected Elon Musk is now looking at our tax returns or is looking at our social security numbers, the question then becomes, are you saying that these social security numbers were unavailable to unelected bureaucrats prior to Elon Musk? No. They looked at it. We may not know who those bureaucrats' names are, but as you say, who do you trust? Would you rather? Elon Musk has no interest in your social security number or mine. What would you do with it?
Steal money?
There you go. Exactly.
Right? Like,
what a plausible idea.
Like empty my bank account? I mean, really?
Yeah, it's nuts. Now, one of the interesting things, the sort of revelations for me here is that Trump has altered the art of the possible. And by that I mean we think of politics as operating within a certain lane. And so we think about, like, in the Reagan years we would say, we want to change out all the political appointees, but unfortunately there's not a whole lot we can do about the career bureaucrats. Trump is like, hold my beer, watch me. Another thing is that we thought as Republicans, you cannot go into government with this kind of a meat axe and just basically start changing passwords, cutting programs, letting people go. This has never even been tried, but it is being tried now. But it does in some ways raise the question, like, what have the Republicans been doing all these years?
Not that.
Not that. Certainly not that, right? And it then makes you think, well, not that much. And this gives fuel to something that you and I have resisted to some degree, which is the rhetoric of unipartyism, that the Republicans are just as bad, they're in it with the Democrats. There's obviously a grain of truth to it, which is why people say it. But why is the idea of the uniparty, just to restate it, why is it a bad idea? Why is it a bad way to think that it's all one party and it's just the party, the uniparty against the people? Yeah,
because we do actually run elections in parties. And if you think that the parties are the same, then people are going to be apt to vote for the bad party because they think the good party
is just as bad as the bad party.
That's right. And so they make the mistake of not voting. For example, in some of the inner cities that we've seen, why do you think that these people are that there's a lot of crime in these cities? There's a lot of dirtiness in these cities. Why do you think that? Is it because it's run by a uniparty or only one party, the bad party?
Yeah,
right?
I mean, that's a good point. You and I have been to, there are quite a few cities in this country, generally smaller cities, but nevertheless, places like Chattanooga, they're beautiful cities, impeccably run.
What's that one in Utah?
St. George's?
St. George.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, beautiful.
Beautiful, clean, safe.
Where we live, I'm not mentioning where, but another example. Yep.
Yeah. So you're saying that the parties do make a difference.
They do make a difference.
Look at New York.
Huge.
New York under Giuliani, a whole different from New York under de Blasio.
Exactly. And it just gets progressively worse. And the more progressive they get, the worse the city gets. So, yeah, there's a difference.
Big difference. Have you seen the news from economists forecasting a depression, not recession, depression, by the year 2030? Not good. We are in a perfect storm as Social Security and Medicare hit a breaking point with the largest generation hitting retirement. A smaller workforce means a smaller tax base. So pair all that with our growing national debt, rising cost of living, we have a big problem. So what are you doing to protect your family now for the future? Gold can be a safe haven in hard economic times, and Birch Gold makes it easy to diversify a portion of your savings into physical gold. Birch Gold will help you to transition an existing IRA or 401k into an IRA in gold, and it won't cost you a penny out of pocket. Protect your future today. Text Dinesh to 989898. You'll get a free information kit on gold and a copy of The Ultimate Guide for Gold in the Trump Era with a foreword by Donald Trump Jr. There's no obligation here, only information. Debbie and I buy our gold from Birch Gold. We've been very happy with it. You can trust Birch Gold. Text my name, Dinesh, to the number 989898 today. Debbie and I care about our health. We've come across a remarkable device that's a total game changer. We've integrated it into our daily routine. It's called Juvent Micro Impact Platform. It's based on the latest cutting-edge science. It uses micro-impact frequency to promote joint health, improve bone density, boost circulation, and even stimulate the production of stem cells in your body. Crazy, right? But it works. All you have to do is stand on it for 10 minutes a day. That's it. It's going to make those crinks and stiffness and aches and pains vanish, and it could even add up to 5 years to your life. Wow. You got to learn about this new technology. The more you learn, the more enthusiastic you'll become. It's not, by the way, to be confused with some of the gimmicky vibration plates out there. Go to juvent.com/Dinesh to learn more. That's Juvent, JUVENT.com/Dinesh. And they've got a great deal for you. $500 off, 10-year warranty, financing options, even a 6-week buyback promise because they believe in the product so much. Juvent can change your life. Check it out at juvent.com/Dinesh. You mentioned this to me yesterday, and we were both pretty taken by this idea. I think it's representative of the new creative thinking that is going on inside and around Trump. And this thinking, by the way, is occurring in all kinds of areas. I mean, just to give a small example, I saw Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary, and he was saying, listen, we have a Census Bureau, right? And the Census Bureau is evidently made up of thousands of people who are temporarily hired and paid quite an exorbitant amount of money to go collect the census data. And Howard Lutnick goes, why are we hiring all these people? We have a post office, right? Why don't we shut down the Census Bureau and basically move its duties into the post office and have the exact same data collected, but done more efficiently, and we don't have to pay any extra. These people are already on our payroll.
Whoa, I have one thing. The post office is not efficient.
Well, honey, I have to admit that the post office is representative of the government, right? What government bureaucracy is truly efficient? Not too many.
Yeah.
Now, at the state level, I have seen greater efficiency. And it may be because it's more local. It's maybe because it's run in a more decentralized way. But all right, so but I only mentioned that as a way of thinking outside the box. Like you have an agency, you think, well, a lot of times people think if an agency has a name, then to get that function performed, you need the agency, not realizing that the agency performs a function And it could well be that the function is done better by some already existing agency. And so you can consolidate.
Right.
So, all right, Trump's latest idea, and I think he's very proud of it. It's very Trumpian. It's the gold card.
Oh, I know.
The gold card. So
I
let's
know.
talk about the gold
Yeah.
card. The gold card is very simply this. If you want to come to America and you are an entrepreneur, you're a successful guy from anywhere in the world, and you're willing to spend $5 million, you get a gold card. And the gold card, as I understand it, is going to be sort of a green card, but with a pathway to citizenship if you want it. You don't have to take it.
So let me get this straight. I thought it was you could buy the card with $5 million.
Correct.
Okay.
Right.
So it's not you're willing to. So it costs $5 million.
It costs $5
You
million.
already have to have the $5 million.
You have to have the $5 million. You have
Yeah.
to, in other words, the $5 million goes into the U.S. Treasury. And let's do some of the math, because look at this math, right? Here's Trump. If we can sell 1 million of these gold cards, that's $5 trillion. Think of our debt, right? Our debt is $36 trillion. That's $5 trillion. He says if we sell 10 million, that's $50 trillion. That means our debt is totally paid off, and we have 15 trillion on top of that. Now, it is.
Are there that many millionaires around the world that want to come to America?
Well, the answer is yes.
Really?
I mean, there are some 75 million millionaires in the world. Now, about 20 million are in the United States. So let's just say there are 50 million millionaires. So Trump is actually saying if out of the 50, he's talking about 10 million. That's a big number. That's 1 out of every 5. So I don't think he expects to get that number, but he's just doing a thought experiment to give you an idea that these add up. Now, contrast the 10 million people that Biden let in illegally.
Oh, yeah. What do they bring?
Freeloaders,
Yeah.
bums,
Yeah.
criminals, convicts, murderers, versus what Trump is saying. And I think what Trump is in a way saying is, look, it's not that we don't want people in America. We want the right people.
Right. So what do you think that the left and the naysayers are saying right now about Trump?
Well, I think we do know,
I
right?
think we do
They're
know.
saying Trump is selling American citizenship.
To the oligarchs.
Trump just wants oligarchs and
Yeah.
rich people. And I think Trump should plead guilty. Trump should basically say, listen,
Yeah, true.
first of all, an oligarch, an oligarch in theory is somebody who is ensconced in a powerful position but doesn't necessarily have any money, right? You can be an oligarch in a certain society. Just think about it. And you have a lot of power. You can get people arrested. But what Trump is saying is we want entrepreneurs. Because if anyone has the money to spend $5 million on a gold card, so to speak, they're going to bring other resources
and by
and
the
talents.
way, this is part of a visa program that started in 1990. So this is not Trump's invention.
It's not entirely new.
Yeah.
Trump is he just likes it, and he
likes it.
wants
And
to use it.
Maybe it wasn't implemented or something, but it goes back to 1990
right.
under you know who.
Well, I can see why it wasn't implemented under Biden, because the type of people they want to come to America are not entrepreneurs. It's
No, they want to get on a different kind of card, i.e. what is it called?
You mean the food stamp
the
card?
Food stamp card.
Exactly.
That's the kind of card they want.
And in fact, their idea is we want to give you money.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Right.
Not we want to get money from you.
No.
All right. Let's turn to the Jeff Bezos and the Washington Post. And there's a bigger context for this, because you might remember that that Trump had booted the AP out of the press pool.
Yes.
And Trump said basically, or the Trump people said, this is Caroline Leavitt and others, they said, if you don't call the Gulf of America, if you insist on calling it the Gulf of Mexico, then too bad, you're not going to be allowed in the press pool. So AP sued. And AP said the White House Press Association has included us in their list of people who need to be in the press room. And guess what the court said? The court said, who cares what the White House Press Association says, because who gave them the authority to decide who's in the press room? And so the Trump people have jumped on that and basically said, from now on, we're not paying any attention to the White House Press Association. We will pick who's going to be in the room, and we're going to let in all kinds of new people who traditionally haven't been in the room, which I think is awesome.
Great.
Right?
Yeah.
But this is called using your power to to take on people who don't wish you well, who have done everything they can to subvert you. When Biden was in, these were all lapdogs.
Of course.
Now they've suddenly become bulldogs.
Not
and
only that, but
Rottweilers.
I think every single one of those reporters knew how far gone Biden was. How could you not? How could you not? They knew. They were in on it. That's what I mean by this incestuous pool of corruption, because they knew all along that Biden wasn't really making any decision.
So what we're saying here, and I think you and I are in agreement on this, is we're saying that what freaked them out was not the discovery that Biden was mentally gone. They were aware of that.
They were.
They were okay with an unelected junta, with its roots maybe in Obama, running the show for Biden. Biden was the ventriloquist dummy. He was the puppet. But what really upset them was when the American people found out.
That's right.
And it was not due to them. They had done their best to cover it up.
To hide it.
But the debate made it manifest.
That's right.
And then they were like, oops. So now, of course, Jake Tapper is going to write this revisionist history in which he's the hero. You know, all these nefarious people are trying to do a cover-up. And so he becomes the Bob Woodward.
Right. Notice that in their world, we're the villains. I mean, you know, it is what it is. I mean, there is no getting around that. You're never going to convince these people otherwise, even though it is, in fact, not we're not the villains, but they turn it around. And the sad thing is that they do have a megaphone. They do.
Well, I think it is changing, though. I think this is a key difference from now to, let's just say, a year ago. A year ago, you and I would have said that they do control the narrative, and we are trying to roll the stone up the hill. We're Sisyphus. We're trying to put the stone up the hill, and our outlets can't compete with theirs. I think that the single factor that has changed that is X. Why? Because look at the New York Times has 5 million subscribers, CBS, ABC, all put together, the networks, those major networks have maybe 30 million. X has 800 million. So start right there. It used to be that if you added up our outlets, it was 1/10 of theirs. But X alone makes up for the difference. So, I mean, look, I'm glad we have Truth Social. I'm glad we have Rumble. But the firepower of X has tilted. Not only that, but these days you can't get news from the news outlets.
But be careful, because sometimes X has really bad news, like as far as incorrect.
It does. The reason it does is because it is, unlike newspapers, which report by the day, right? What happened yesterday is in the Washington Post. X is reporting by the second. So what happens is people grab onto something, and then they hear it. They want to hear it first. They then transmit it. And the correction sometimes has to follow like 10 minutes later.
It's like a game of telephone, you know, where you tell someone something and then they tell that person. By the time it gets to the end, it's like completely different than the beginning.
Exactly.
So,
and sometimes what happens is you actually discover the truth. Like you and I were watching the Clinton video, and I genuinely thought Clinton has released a statement on the Epstein files, and he starts out by saying, yes, with the Epstein file, and it's in Clinton's voice, right? But then what happens is you have to be an attentive listener, because he goes, first of all, these crimes all occurred in another country. And then he goes, there are many people who are stressing that there are people under 18. He goes, but when you add up the ages of the girls, it's over 18.
Yeah, but when he started when he started talking, I knew it was AI.
Right away?
Yes, because he sounded he didn't sound agile. He sounded very, young, and his voice didn't have that whimper in it. So I was like, that's a young Clinton. And then when he said, I knew that was taken from the Monica Lewinsky.
Right.
And he said he didn't have sexual relations with that woman.
Right.
That, I was like, oh my goodness.
And then, of course, we both knew
chuckled.
That this was a meme and a joke. Hello, folks. Dinesh here. Big tech is cashing in trillions on our data and attention. As a proud Mode Mobile shareholder, I'm excited to share something revolutionary, introducing the Earn Phone, by Mode Mobile. This smartphone shares revenue with you, paying out over $325 million in earnings and savings to users. With 32,481% growth in 3 years, Mode Mobile is transforming how we use our phones. Now, find out how you can join me as a co-owner. If you invest today, not only could you receive up to 100% bonus shares, but you can even get a free Earn phone after investing. Visit invest.modemobile.com/Dinesh. That's invest.mode, M-O-D-E, mobile, M-O-B-I-L-E.com/Dinesh.
The following was a paid advertisement sponsored by Mode Mobile. Salem is not an investment advertiser, and this is not a recommendation to buy or sell securities. Salem and Dinesh D'Souza were paid $7,140 to carry this ad on his podcast network. Mr. D'Souza is also receiving 5,648 shares in Mode Mobile as compensation for this ad. His investment decisions for these shares may differ from this ad's recommendations. Salem does not endorse any investment product. Consult your financial advisor before investing.
MyPillow is excited to announce they're having the first ever mega sale on overstock, clearance, and brand new products. For example, you can save over 50% on the season's flannel sheets. The queen size, just $59.98. The kings, only $69.98. They sell out fast every year. Be sure to order now. You can also save 30% on their brand new My Crosses. They're designed in the likeness of the one Mike Lindell has worn every day for over 20 years. They come in men's and women's styles, and they're made right here in the USA. Get the 2025 6-piece My Towel sets for just $29.98. The initial quantities are low, so get them now before they go. And I don't want to forget the best-selling standard MyPillow, just $14.98. Take advantage of the first ever mega sale. Call 800-876-0227. Again, it's 800-876-0227, or go to mypillow.com. Make sure to use the promo code. It's DINESH, Dinesh. One more thing. Remember the Mike Lindell old deal, which is if you spend over $75, you get free shipping. Well, it's even better right now. For a limited time, every order ships free. So, honey, you take the lead on this one because we want to talk about what really is the thumbnail for today's discussion, which is the Texas Roundup.
Yes.
I was first tipped off to this because Governor Abbott was putting out statements basically talking about the fact that he's working closely with Tom Homan and with ICE on a fairly major operation in this sort of illegal community. I mean, right now, right away, this is an interesting idea, right? Where the illegals form almost like a town unto themselves. It's called Colony Ridge in Texas, and it is now being raided by ICE, and raided in a significant way. In other words, it's not a case of, let's go to Colony Ridge and find one guy. They have found some notorious criminals. But just to give you a brief here, this is from Brooke Taylor, which is that ICE confirms 118 arrests in Colony Ridge. Charges and convictions of those arrested include criminal sexual conduct, homicide, theft, negligent manslaughter, child sexual abuse, crimes of moral turpitude, weapons offenses, drug offenses. So the point being that there are a lot of these bad guys who are in these encampments.
Well, why is that shocking? If this is a little city in and of itself, like a city for illegals, there is going to be a percentage of those illegals that are here for nefarious purposes, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, that it makes sense. So while I'm glad that they are taking out the criminals, first, there are schools that are made up of completely illegals, completely. Yeah. So our tax dollars, even our Texas, money, is going to illegal education of illegal aliens, which is also bad, So I think that
I think they're right to focus on this as round one,
mm-hmm.
but I think you're right that ultimately, when you're talking about 10 million or more illegals in the country, simply returning the convicted offenders is going to be only a small percentage.
Yeah.
And there have been some people on the right, generally some of the, the Groypers and some of these guys who always like to do little zingers on Trump as if to act like he's not doing enough. They're like, what happened to all the deportations that we were promised? And so I think this chorus, though, will grow unless
Oh, there's been a lot of deportations. There's also been a lot of stoppings.
stopping.
Like,
Yes.
now, I am a little bit, I'm going to talk about, let me know when it's okay to talk about
Go
this
for it.
Texas rancher. But, I mean, as many people know, I grew up in the Rio Grande Valley. In fact, for a semester, I went to school at a junior college called Texas Southmost College. I think they've changed the name since then.
Yeah.
But it was literally on the border of Texas and Mexico. It was in Brownsville, and about a 10-minute walk, and you were in Mexico. You were in
Wow.
Matamoros. So many times there were a lot of incidents where some of the students that were in at Southmost were actually from Mexico. In fact, I don't know if some people remember this young boy, Kilroy, who was murdered in Matamoros by this notorious gang of like voodoo people. I don't know, Santeria or something, right?
Some ritualistic
Some ritualistic
slaying.
thing. They killed him. They did all kinds of things to him and other people, and they found his corpse and other people's bodies in this ranch, Santa Ana Ranch, I believe, right outside of Matamoros. Anyway, the girlfriend of the ringleader went to school with me there at Southmost at the same time.
Wow.
And so it doesn't surprise me that any of those things are, happen then. But the really interesting thing is that there are a lot of drug cartels right now in Matamoros and in Reynosa. For those of you that don't know the Rio Grande Valley, Matamoros is right across from Brownsville. It's right there, the bridge in Brownsville and Matamoros, and Reynosa is the one that follows McAllen. So it's all in the Rio Grande Valley,
Just on the other side, so to speak, of the border.
Right, right, just on the other side of the border, just the bordering towns, Reynosa, Matamoros, and they are just reeking of cartels. I mean, there's just cartels everywhere. And one of the main presence cartels there is called the Gulf Cartel. That's the biggest cartel. And it's one of the oldest cartels in Mexico. And it has splintered off into other smaller cartels. But nevertheless, there's a lot of fighting that goes on between these groups, like territory. This is my territory. Get out of here. Blah, 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 and they start shooting up. And so people that are shopping in Matamoros or eating at a restaurant in Matamoros, sometimes they get caught in the crossfire.
Wow.
And so that's bad enough. And I feel like we should investigate that, right? However, something just happened recently. And a Texas rancher was actually killed by a suspected cartel IED. Think about this. What did Trump just recently declare these cartels to be? A terrorist organization. What do terrorists do? They blow up people with IEDs. They decapitate people. They terrorize people. This is what the cartels are doing. And this one was right on the border. And apparently he was, I don't know if he was in his truck. I think he was in his truck. He was just driving along the edge there. And they happened upon an IED and it exploded and it killed him and I think his ranch hand and injured the wife of the ranch hand, I believe. So anyway, this is one of many IEDs that apparently are on the border. And in fact, the Texas Agriculture Commissioner, Sid Miller, I know him, said that this is part of a growing threat posed by cartel activity along the southern border. I mean, come on, guys. If this doesn't wake people up enough, I don't know what will.
Well, yeah, I think, as a country, we have to step back and reassess what are we threatened by, right? Are we threatened by the war in Ukraine? Or are we threatened by, we are. This is not to say I'm not saying that there are international threats, right? We are threatened by radical Islamic forces that would like to kill us if they could.
Yep.
They have taken American captives, even in America, some Americans in Israel. So we do have people abroad who are a threat, but we also have threats right on our border. And what are we putting all this money into defense if our defense forces cannot be deployed against these threats. So if there's a terrorist threat at the border with the cartels, we have SEAL teams. I mean, we have...
Well, yeah, we do. But we also have, there's a president in Mexico, Sheinbaum,
Claudia Sheinbaum,
who is a communist, as we found out.
You were describing to me her family history, and this woman is like right out of the womb of Castro.
She's Castro's daughter. No,
but like ideologically,
yeah, ideologically, yes.
And wasn't her dad a communist?
Yes, he was. He was in the Communist Party. Yes, and so she is a complete leftist, supposedly some kind of a feminist. But she basically said, "Listen, do not come in here and threaten the cartels, because we're not going to stand for it, Mexico, right? Because the fact that the cartels have all these weapons and IEDs and everything else is America's fault, because they're getting them from America. And so you have to stop it in your own, look at your own town before you come over here." Well, that is the case, that we are selling some of our arms, or maybe not selling
on the
is
black
the right
market,
word.
or however they obtain these weapons.
Yeah, so that is a case, but it's also a case that these cartels become very powerful in Mexico. And if she, as president of Mexico, cannot stop, I mean, when I looked...
All right, so we'll do our part, and she can do her part.
Yeah.
So in other words, to the degree that the U.S. government can intercept these weapon sales, bust up these arms networks that are supplying the cartels, I'm all for doing that. But I think what we're getting at here is that the Mexican political authorities are compromised by the cartels. They're paid
It has
by
to be.
It has to be.
It has to be, because if you look at a map, I was looking at a Google map the other day of where all the cartels are and all the different crimes that happen in Mexico. I mean, you look at the map of Mexico, and it's covered with all of this. You tell me that her government is like on it.
I mean, think about it. When we think of cartels, we should not think about, in the old days, we would think about, terrorists and criminals as like, these are the people who live in the mountains and they run these guerrilla operations. But in a country like Mexico, these cartels are connected to the bankers. They have investments in resorts. These are people who are influential figures in Mexican society. They probably back political candidates.
With a
and
lot of
so
money. Yeah.
they are,
Yeah.
and when you look at the amounts of money involved, let's remember, Mexico is a second world country. Elon Musk, in fact, recently posted, should we pay our politicians more so that they are not subject to temptations to collect money on the side?
Mhm.
But I mean, think about a Mexican policeman, or even a police chief, or even a local elected official, and how much money they make or don't make.
And honey, and it's not even just that. It's that these cartel members know that if they threaten a police chief with like, okay, if you don't do this, see your son over here, his head is going to end up in a suitcase and I'm going to deliver it to you. Things like that, threat, bodily harm. So it's not just a matter of they're taking money from cartels. It's that the cartels run the government. They really do. They coerce, they scare, they intimidate.
It's a reign of terror
inside
of Mexico.
But if you don't, if you are as president of Mexico have the balls to go after these people, they're going to continue to not just, and it makes me feel sad, because I'm not just sad that these people are so out of control and our border and our U.S. citizens are at risk, but there are thousands of people in Mexico that go missing every day because of these cartels.
Right.
And these women go missing. I mean, it's just the saddest thing. And so for me, it's like, take care of your own country.
I mean, Reagan ran a military operation in Grenada to recover American medical students who were jeopardized by the revolutionary climate over there. I don't see any problem. I mean, we would like to have the cooperation of the Mexican political authorities, but if they don't, if the cartels are conducting operations with a direct impact on the United States,
Well,
they are.
They just did this. To me, this is an act of war. I mean, really, this ID for a
Yeah.
U.S. citizen is an act of war.
Yeah, and we're not talking about declaring war against Mexico. We're talking about being able to use lethal military force in order to disable people who are conducting these terrorist operations inside the United States. We like to close out on a lighter note, and the topic we've selected to finish up today is the differences between the generations. Notably, before we talk about the generations, let's take a moment to clarify what these generations are, because they all have names, right?
They do.
So
They do.
can you give us a breakdown of the generations?
Yes. Okay, so it starts with the greatest generation,
Yeah.
and that was people born between 1901 and 1927. So our grandparents.
The World War II, Great Depression, that's the greatest generation,
Yes.
the people who lived through that.
And then their children, our parents, the silent generation, born 1928 to 1945. My mom was born in 1936, yours 34.
Yeah, so these are
So-
people who were very young in World War II.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't really participants in the war, but they were affected by it.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess they're the silent generation because they're transitional from the greatest generation to the baby boom generation, right? So what's the baby boom age?
So baby boom is 1946 to 1964.
So that
And
means that I'm in it at the very end of it, and you are out of it
at the very beginning
at the
of
very
it,
beginning of the
of
next,
the next generation.
which is called what?
So the next generation is Gen X.
Gen X.
So I'm kind of a Gen Xer, but I do actually have more baby boomer qualities than I do Gen X qualities. You know,
because I think even when you were younger, you identified with people a little older than you were.
I did. I always did.
So
Yes.
you're more connected to
that generation.
the late boomers
That's
than
right.
the early Xers. And who
That's
comes
right.
after X? Y?
So then comes the millennials, the Y, yes, 1981 to 1996. So our two oldest kids, Justin and Danielle, are millennials.
Right. Both born in
1995.
and Brandon was 94, so
Yeah.
he falls in that camp as well.
Yep.
Okay.
And then Gen Z, my favorite generation, that's Juliana.
That's
That's 1997 to 2010.
right.
That is
And then you said Little Marigold is
Marigold is alpha.
so. In other words, it's almost like they've gone to Z and now they're back to A,
yeah,
which is alpha,
yeah,
right?
alpha. And then beta is born 2025 to 2039.
Ah,
So probably gonna be our other grandkids.
right.
Right.
So Marigold is the very end of alpha.
She's the end of alpha.
And they've now
She's
already
almost beta.
named beta. All right.
That's right.
So now let's talk about, you start up. How did you
Yeah.
want to get into this?
Yeah. So no, it's just really funny because when we talk, like when I talk to Juliana or kids her age, they always say back in the day, you know,
Well, back in the
back
day.
in the day. And back in the day was when we were in high school. That was back in the day for them. You know, the
Right.
80s.
Right.
That's back in the day. And what's back in the day for us?
Well, I mean, when I think of back in the day, I think of like the Neanderthals, right? I mean, I think of back in the day like ancient Greece. Back in the days, the 5th century BC or earlier centuries. I don't
Yeah.
think we think in terms of like, I don't even think of like back in the day, meaning like when my parents were younger,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
because, because to me, back in the day is a synonym for ancient.
Yeah.
But I think that's what they mean. For Generation Z, 3 decades ago is ancient.
Yeah.
And maybe this is all dictated by technology because it's almost as if new technology signals a new epoch.
right.
We don't see it that way because to us, we see the new technology, but we don't let it define us, I think, to the degree it defines these guys.
Yeah, that's true. So there's some characteristics that I want to kind of go over.
Yeah.
So the baby boomers, boomers are named for the population of boom that occurred after World War II, right?
Right.
And many young people of this generation defied their parents. Remember, we talked about the 60s, you know, the
Right.
hippie generation protesting the Vietnam War. created the Summer of Love. They have refined parenting by being the first generation to look at their kids' perspective of growing up. And they started the concept of having family meetings and things like that. You know, they're the ones that kind of got into that, right?
Well, yeah. This is a big important change, because I think that you can't understand the Generation Z without recognizing this shift, right? So here, what's the shift we're talking about? In our parents' generation, the rules were made by the parents.
Mm-hmm.
The children were seen as present, but having no democratic role in the decisions of the household.
Mm-hmm.
They were never consulted, by and large, on what they wanted. And I grew up like that. I grew up in that system.
Yeah, so this is really interesting. This article says, Generation X parents were the first to use helicopter parenting styles. Unlike their boomer parents who famously let their kids stay outside until the streetlights came on, Gen Xers tend to be far more involved with their children's social and educational development, and tend to be a little more like
clingy, participatory.
Which is no surprise to why the Gen Zers are the way, the millennials and the Gen Zers are the way they are, right?
But do you think, in other words, you know, I try to take a sympathetic view of each generation to see how its traits develop, right? So, for example, why is it the case that the boomers were more indulgent as parents than their own parents? And I think the answer is that they were the product of the prosperity of the post-war, right? So because they had so much, and because they remember that some of them grew up in deprived conditions, deprivation, they didn't want their children to go through that.
Mm-hmm.
So they indulged them. Now,
Mm-hmm.
that's how you get spoiled kids, but you can kind of see how it happened.
That's true. That, and then coupled with the fact that they're the first to be born into a world where they know nothing besides constant connection to one another, albeit through phones, screens, tablets. However, like millennials before them, the Gen Zers are often environmentally conscious, inclusive and accepting of others, and extremely political aware, despite many of them not being of voting age.
So,
but it doesn't say that they're like lazy in some aspects and expect a lot from their parents and don't want to move out of the house and, you know, those things. It doesn't say that.
Yeah. It's a generation that is it's very connected, and yet it's not conversational, if you notice. In other words, the Gen Z types, even with themselves, I'm not talking about relating to other generations, which is a whole different issue. But, for example, dating doesn't occur in a normal way with Gen Zers. It's almost as if they would rather relate to you by a text than actually having a conversation. They feel more comfortable.
There are some Gen Zers that I've noticed are a little more old-fashioned in that way, that they like to have that interaction, but very few.
Very few.
It's more the exception.
The other thing we've noticed, you and I have in our when we deal with Gen Zers of all types, and we're talking by and large with Gen Zers from Republican families. So these are going to be probably somewhat less Gen Z-ish than the norm. But nevertheless, if you ask them something, they don't say...
I know what you're going to say.
Well, they give you the reason why they can't do it, right? As if the reason why they can't do it makes up for not being able to do it, right? So why didn't you come to work yesterday?
I overslept.
Oh, no. Yeah. Or I had to take my dog to the vet, right? Now, that is not a good reason not to show up.
Right.
But for the Gen Zer, it is.
Yes. Because it's a legitimate reason. They're being honest about it.
They're being honest about it. And I remember even Brandon was talking about, he had hired this. Brandon is himself a millennial. So he's a not far from Gen Z, but he had this young guy working for him, and they would plan to do like a daily review of their activities, and they're on the phone, and the other guy goes, "Hey, Brandon, I gotta go. I gotta go to lunch with my dad." And Brandon was like, "Well, but this is the time when we do our review of the things you're supposed to be doing. But to that guy, it was like, well, we could always do the review any other time. I've
This is
scheduled
really
lunch.
important.
This is really important to me. It's,
Yeah.
I'm hanging out with my dad.
And that's actually not even that common with Gen Zers to have dinner with or lunch with their parents and
Right.
find that important. That's actually good.
Right.
I like that.
And I think that
yeah.
Gen Z has a lot of good qualities, and some of the things that they endure and complain about, they're quite justified.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is that I know when I graduated, say from college, right? It never occurred to me that I'm going to get a job, but it's going to be extremely difficult for me to, say, buy a home. I thought, of course, it's not easy. I'm going to have to rent for a couple of years, but then I'm going to put a down payment on a small condo, and within maybe another 5 years, I'll be able to afford a house. And I'm not unique. Everybody thought like this. All my friends were in the same camp. All of us thought that having a house, having a nice yard, having 2 cars is well within our reach. And so I think for young Gen Zers today, even ones that are well-educated and work hard, they look and they go, it's $700,000 in a nice neighborhood to buy a house. How on earth am I going? What kind of income would I have to have to even remotely be able to afford that?
In many cases, we, the parents, have to help. I mean, that's just the way it is.
Right. So we can't say that they are less self-reliant than we are, because the ability of them to be self-reliant is much less.
Yeah, it is. You're right. Well, I just have to end it on a really funny note. I can't play this on, the podcast, but just go to X, the platform X, and look up Maniac Dancing 80s. Okay.
This is the song, Maniac,
the song
right?
Maniac. So anyway, this girl comes on, and you already think it's a little goofy. This blonde girl singing Maniac. She's a maniac. All this stuff. Yeah, she's making all these moves, and you think that's funny, but then enters the dude in the picture, and it's hilarious. You will die laughing so hard. In fact, I showed it to my Gen Zer. She thought it was pretty funny, but I think she just expects that people that were like doing this in the 80s are just out there.
They're nuts.
They're nuts, right? But the funny thing, and I told you this, is I was in a show choir and I sang Maniac, and I probably danced this very routine.
And you didn't think it was ridiculous then.
I didn't think it was funny then. I thought it was the coolest thing ever. But now looking back in the day, I think it's pretty darn funny.
We're laughing at our younger selves in a sense, which is a good thing to do.
Subscribe to the Dinesh D'Souza podcast on Apple, Google, and Spotify, or watch on Rumble, YouTube, and SalemNow.com.